We represent, and I say we as in conservatives, a tiny, tiny fraction of the political violence problem in America. That is the truth. That is the truth. This is contingent on Democrats being willing to address the problem on their side. Period. And we had responses all over the place. And I'll say, basically every mainstream Democratic politician and even like the AOCs of the world, they put out statements yesterday, condemning what happened to Charlie Kirk. And that's great. You should do that. And in our state, Governor Bob Ferguson and Attorney General Nick Brown both put out statements as well. Governor Bob Ferguson said, "Violence is never the answer. There is no place in our democracy for political violence, and I condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk in the strongest terms. My prayers are with his family." Attorney General Nick Brown said, "No matter your beliefs, we should live without fear of expressing ourselves. Political violence will consume us all if we let it fester. The horrifying tragedy and death of Charlie Kirk today in Utah can happen anywhere if we don't do more to fix the violent tension in our discourse. The rule of law must preserve, and gun violence is never the answer." Now, in a sane world, I would see that and think, okay, good, that's appropriate. And that's a step. It's one step. But of course, for anyone who follows any of these politicians, whether they're members of Congress, in DC or AOC or our governor and our attorney general, you see that and you think about all the times they've refused to put out such a simple no-brainer statement condemning political violence. And you also understand how they individually have contributed to the environment that we're in. Attorney General Nick Brown, how many times has he called Donald Trump a fascist? And said similar inflammatory things about ICE agents. He said recently, he did an interview with KUOW, we played it on the show a million times, I won't play it again, where he said what Trump is doing is the definition of fascism. And Bob Ferguson has made his entire political career off of painting Donald Trump as a threat to democracy in our very way of life and existence as a country. And as I've said a million times on this show, you convince people that Donald Trump is Hitler reincarnate? There are very few things that those people will not do to stop the second coming of Hitler. And so, to me, when I see those statements saying violence is never the answer, and Attorney General Nick Brown saying that violence will consume us if we don't do more to fix the tension in our discourse, I think, you first. You first, because I don't say stuff like you say. I don't paint people as fascists in the second coming of Hitler and suggest that if we're not rid of them, our country will cease to exist as we know it. And so there's 3 things that have to happen. I literally wrote down 3 steps because I'm like, what can we take away from this, right? So first, Democrats in positions of power, because there's always going to be, let's put out of our mind the fringe lunatics. And that's why I didn't platform them on the show today. Again, they were crazy. There was a vigil for Charlie Kirk in Westlake Park last night. There were absolute lunatics shouting about how they'd shoot him more times if they could. There's people holding up signs and celebrating Charlie Kirk's demise. And then, of course, in the bowels of the internet, and teachers and nurses and all these wackadoodle people who we know exist. They are such a small fraction. They truly are. They are such a small fraction. And so let's put them out of our minds and render them absolutely insignificant. Let's focus on the people who can, in some small way, be convinced to do better. Because those people cannot. They're just done for. Because if we stop giving them so much political cover, then they are out there on an island all alone. But when they feel as if the governor of the state of Washington, the attorney general of the state of Washington, members of Congress have their back because they're not saying anything, because they're kind of endorsing violence against Republicans by painting them as Hitler and fascists, then that's when those fringe lunatics feel empowered to do more and take those horrible, disgusting thoughts and put them into action. So let's focus on the 80% of people who I think we can reasonably get through to. So any Democrat in any position of influence or authority needs to do three things. You have to, yes, as most of them did yesterday, condemn acts of political violence immediately and unequivocally. No saying, oh, but also the other side does it too. No. Focus on the individual act of political violence. Condemn it, make it very clear, whoever you are, a politician, a public figure, a member of the media, that it's completely unacceptable in your eyes. So that's number one. Number two, you have to make your future actions match those words in everything you do and say. So Nick Brown cannot come out and say, I condemn political violence and we have to lower the temperature, and then turn around tomorrow and call Donald Trump a fascist, because then it negates this entirely. And then the next time, which will probably be tonight or tomorrow, because it happens almost every freaking day, that Antifa factions wreak chaos and violence on our streets, you have to immediately and unequivocally say something about it. Because you can't just let it go. You can't just do it when it's such a big issue like Charlie Kirk and such a big story. And then when it's happening in your own backyard, in your own community, oh, but that's the left. We can't say anything about it because, we don't want them coming after us. So you have to condemn it unequivocally without blaming the other side or making it both sides of some issue. And then your words have to match your actions from this day forth. And if they don't, we will call you on it every single time. And step three, and this is the most important one, because if you don't do it, then all of that means nothing. You owe us an apology. And not us, not conservatives. You owe the people who you are supposed to serve an apology for your past failures to condemn political violence and for the rhetoric that you have used in recent years that has contributed to it. If you do not make things right with a sincere acknowledgement of where you have personally fallen short, then nothing else you do from today moving forward matters one bit. Governor Bob Ferguson, I'm talking to you. You were the state's chief law enforcer for 12 years. You were the state's chief law enforcer in 2020 as police officers were being assaulted, as reporters were being assaulted, as the state's largest city was burning, as cop cars were burning, as far-left agitators took over 6 square blocks of a city, rendering a police precinct useless, endangering an entire neighborhood. And during that entire period of time, you, sir, said nothing. You condemned nothing. You know it. I know it. Everyone knows it. You have to apologize for it. You have to acknowledge that that silence and inaction from you as the Attorney General was in essence an endorsement of what was being done. Because when you're out there and you're rioting in the streets and you're assaulting police officers and you're ruining a city, and everyone in a position of power stays silent about it, you're going to take that as permission to keep doing it. And Bob Ferguson is far from the only one who owes an apology and who has to be introspective publicly about his own conduct. Because if he doesn't do it, he can't take on the next steps. I'm willing to let anyone change their ways. And I'll say for myself, if there's one thing I've been consistent on, it is political violence. Even when I was brainwashed in the mainstream news, I still called that violence what it was. It didn't matter who was perpetrating it, whether it was the right-wingers who were down at the Capitol storming the governor's mansion, or whether it was the left-wingers who were assaulting cops. So I feel like I have standing to demand that our elected leaders do better on this and acknowledge past mistakes and move forward. So we have to have consistency. And I'll give anyone, as I was saying, an opportunity to do better and to maybe shed this long-standing criticism that I've had of you. It's going to take a while, but I'll tell you what, even Bob Ferguson, I'll continue to talk to you. I've probably been your harshest critic. If you come out today and you apologize for not speaking out about the hundreds of instances of political violence and extremism that have happened on the left in this state, and you honest to God give an apology and a mea culpa, and then for the next year, moving forward, you change your ways, you tone down your rhetoric about the President of the United States, you acknowledge that Antifa is a real thing, you speak out about what's happening and the attacks on ICE and all of these things, I am willing to give you a fresh slate on that issue. I think we have to be willing to believe that people can change and do better, or else what are we resigning ourselves to? And I hate to get too preachy and all this stuff, but I mean, we're at a turning point, if you will, in our country. And we all have to decide what path we're going to try to push our country down. And I don't want to push our country down a path of anger and resentment and division. And what am I going to do? I mean, I think I can do better too. I mean, I have a show called Undivided. I get awful pissed off on this show a lot. I usually think it's warranted. But, you know, I was thinking about this last night. And I realize I'm talking about this for 32 minutes. We have other things to talk about on the show today. But I thought about this last night and I tried to be introspective. And what can I do better? And I think language matters. And I think I can do better about making clear what we're fighting for rather than what we're fighting against. You know, I talk often about we're fighting against this radical gender ideology being pushed on kids in schools, but what does that really mean? Well, what am I fighting for, not against? I'm fighting for a better educational outcome for our kids. I'm fighting for parents to have more agency and more control over their kids' lives and over what happens with their kids in public schools that we fund. And so that might seem like a small difference, but maybe in the grand scheme of things, it can help lower the temperature a little bit and not focus on against, but for. And so I can do that. I can try to do that. But when it comes to political violence, I can't condemn it any more than I already do. So those are the 3 steps. Condemn political violence when it happens unequivocally without making it of both sides as an issue. Make your actions and words match moving forward. And when it's warranted, a sincere apology and an admission of responsibility for contributing to where we're at as a country right now. One thing I want to do before we move on from Charlie Kirk, although we're ending the show with something I think you guys will just maybe make you cry. I don't want to make you cry, but our friend Dory Monson, the late Dory Monson, he actually watched Charlie Kirk speak in 2021, and our friend Matt Gilbert, who's an undivided viewer, dug up the old audio of Dory talking about Charlie Kirk, and it's so relevant to everything we're dealing with right now. We just have to end the show with it, so I hope you stick with us long enough to hear that. But, you know, one of the things that I think has frustrated conservatives so much, and I would say I'm like newly in the last year kind of acknowledging that, yes, I'm a conservative and, you know, I've been red-pilled quite a bit on a variety of things. But, you know, there's this feeling among conservatives that they start in mainstream culture. They start from this position of having to like prove they're not bad people. And if you're, you know, liberal, oh, you're a great person unless you prove otherwise over and over and over and over again. So conservatives are just sort of shunned in mainstream culture. And I experienced that a lot personally, right? As I kind of became more and more conservative and took these positions that were very out of line with Seattle mainstream beliefs. I mean, I used to be invited to a lot of mainstream things to speak or whatever it is. And then it's like, nope, can't have her. I feel like I'm the same person. You know, I'm not a bad person, but it's like conservative bad. So the Yankees did something yesterday that it might seem small, but it's not. It's huge when you really think about it, and conservatives and its relationship with, you know, how they're perceived by mainstream culture. They honored Charlie Kirk at their game. And they didn't give any sort of qualification about it. They had his picture up, remembering Charlie Kirk. And they had a short, nice, moment of silence for him, and it was nothing else. And it was this moment about it sucked all the politics out of it. And it was just this moment of humanity, and I don't know that I've ever seen it at a baseball game in America, where it's you know what? Yes, conservatives are people too. And conservatives deserve, to have their lives honored when they do something important for our country. And I know that sounds silly, but I saw that and I was just I think the Yankees in that moment with that gesture almost did more to help heal our country than anything else that happened yesterday. And I'm sure there were people in the crowd who were angry about it, but remember, we don't care about them. We can't fix them. We can't fix the 10 to maybe, I hope not, but maybe 20% of people who cannot be reasoned with. And the Yankees did it knowing that they exist, knowing they'd be in the crowd, and they just did not care. And so that to me is one simple thing that can just humanize people. And just say, you know what? No, conservatives don't deserve to be treated as second-class citizens who aren't deserving of love and sympathy and respect.